go.
Good evening, namaskar, adab. Warm welcome to another edition of our special broadcast, which we bring before you each night. And tonight is a special night because tonight I've got three of my very dear friends and a new friend as well. We're all joining us live. Faye DSouza joining us live from Mumbai. Hi, Faye. Good to have you on the program today.
Always a pleasure, Bhupen. Always a pleasure.
Nice to see you, Dr. Dinesh Singh. Needs no introduction. Former Vice Chancellor of the University, one of the foremost educationists in the country. Mr. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner, live with us as well. And Dimpy Mahanta is joining us all the way from Guwahati.
Hi.
Why all our friends today are with us is because guess what? Today completes the first month of being in lockdown. In the history of independent India, who would have ever imagined? Would ever imagine that one day we'll come to a scenario where the very fact that we could, just walk out of our houses, walk out of our places, just get on with our lives in a free and fair manner would end up being a huge. What exactly has been achieved? What has been lost? Kya khoya, kya paya? That's what I want to know. And as we always do, as you're seeing, there are no politicians on this broadcast. This is a genuine attempt being made to try and shift public discourse back towards facts, back towards data, that Congress, BJP, SP, BSP, all that to the TV screen. This is a new world. This is a world where we just want to focus on data and we want you, the viewer, to be informed. Because the biggest disservice which will be done if you are not informed is that you will not end up making a decision which is based on facts, which is based on information. So, ladies and gentlemen, want to straight away begin with putting the facts the way they are. Through the day, my production team has pulled out a lot of data from all corners of the world. We're specifically going to look at what has really been done in this last 1 month, what has been the impact on India's economy, and what do we need to do to come out of this challenge that we're really confronted with. So let's first put up our first graphic on the show today. And this first graphic tells you the story that you really need to take a good hard look at. Increase in unemployment, urban plus rural areas, data coming up as of 20th of April, courtesy Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Before lockdown, where were we in terms of unemployment? 7 to 8%. And where are we now? 24%. For all the discourse which you're seeing about what has happened in Palghar and what has happened elsewhere in Tablighi Jamaat and some great international conspiracy, this is the statistic that you really need to focus on very clearly. 24% is the existence of unemployment rate as we speak. Take a look at the next graphic, and it'll tell you how bad the situation is. Urban versus rural divide. In rural parts, and this should trouble people more, in rural parts, urban unemployment increasing. In urban parts, well, the impact is not so high. I want to begin first with you, Dr. Dinesh Singh. Help me understand what happens, sir, if you're living in an economy where the global crude oil prices are now sub-zero, fear being expressed that India's GDP growth could actually also be negative, not 1.9%, not under 2%. These numbers that I'm looking at, Dr. Singh, could these numbers actually get even more aggravated as we move along?
Well, Bhupen, to begin with, it's very hard to get a complete picture with reliable data in India. I'm looking at these figures and I've studied them a little bit. But my guess is that the unemployment situation is far higher, even though I have anecdotal evidence. So be clear, anecdotal, but reasonably substantial. And no matter where I find out, migrants have returned in huge numbers, even though many are trapped in urban areas. Many have returned in huge numbers to rural areas, at least in UP and Bihar. And there isn't enough work for them. This is all disguised unemployment. They may be used for the Rabi crop, but they aren't necessary. First of all, most Rabi crop used to be harvested using machines. So those machines are not going to be utilized and someone will suffer. Whoever used to hire out all those huge numbers of machines, they will suffer. Their people will get unemployed. These people who will do that will do it far more inefficiently and they aren't needed in so many numbers. So that's worrisome to begin with. And there are other things that are, happening that we are not able to catch in such a picture, such a situation.
Like what? That's what I want to know, sir. Like what? What is it that we can't capture, Dr. Singh?
So again, this is anecdotal, but I have had reports and inputs from several parts of India, Rajasthan, Odisha, some other Andhra Pradesh, that there are large numbers of communities that are not only just unemployed, but they have nothing to eat. That is a huge problem. I have no hard data, but there's enough of this anecdotal stuff coming in to tell you that people are suffering. So the economy is not in good shape at this point in time.
Okay. I want to put up another graphic point, and this is in terms of sectors. What is happening? I want to bring in Faye on this one. That if we look at the story of Indian economy through various sectors, look at agriculture, and this graphic it's coming via KPMG, the potential impact of COVID-19 on Indian economy, again as of 20th of April. Whether it's telecom sector, whether it's agriculture sector, textiles, the numbers are so huge, Faye. When you have a month of lockdown, and all these sectors end up becoming high-risk sectors. I mean, agriculture, look at this. The biggest sector where the maximum number of your workforce is employed, as Dr. Singh is saying today, just does not have any place to go to. What kind of impact does it end up having on the emotional psyche of individuals when you're staring at unemployment figures and high-risk factors across such critical sectors?
Well, specifically the emotional, if you're talking psychologically, I have spent the last 1 month talking to psychiatrists, talking to psychologists. Now, unfortunately, the psychological impact is something we've only really studied in urban India. So as far as the agriculture, and other sectors are concerned, we don't really know what sort of an impact that's having. Within urban India, there is a lot of anxiety. There's anxiety in families because people are at home and not all homes are safe places, emotionally or physically. There's a rise in domestic abuse cases, rise in child abuse cases. We also know that there's anxiety in any average adult in India right now about whether I will keep my job. If I'm running a business, whether I'll be able to pay salaries and keep everyone employed. As adults, we're worried about keeping our children safe from the virus, our extended family safe, about sourcing groceries and just keeping the house running. So there is a tremendous amount of anxiety for anyone who's not fully well, people who have sort of critical illnesses that need taken care of, dialysis, for example, severe mental illnesses, organ transplant recovery patients. Sourcing medication, sourcing regular treatment, getting their caregivers to come home has also been a huge problem. So unless you are fairly young, rich, in possession of your full faculties, mental and physical, this is being a very difficult time. So it's not just the mental strain, it's also the financial and the physical strain that the lockdown has taken on individuals.
Qureshi, how does one deal with this scenario, Qureshi? My question today is क्या खोया और क्या पाया? मुझको ये बताइए कुरैशी साहब कि हमने पाया क्या? इस पूरे लॉकडाउन में क्या हमने कुछ पाया है क्या सर?
नहीं, हमने अगर एक चीज पाई है कि नेशनल यूनिटी के लॉकडाउन में आप इक्का दुक्का वायलेशन को चलिए भूल छोड़ दें, जो बहुत कम है, लेकिन 99.9% जो लोगों का इसमें सहयोग मिल रहा है, ये बहुत क्रेडिटेबल है. और हमें यह याद रखना चाहिए कि इंडिया इज नॉट जस्ट वन सिंगल कंट्री. इंडिया इज 90 कंट्रीज रोल्ड इनटू वन. एंटायर यूरोप इंडिया में का आधा है. तो अगर हम उन सारी कंट्रीज के मुकाबले में अगर कंपेयर करें तो हमने कंटेनमेंट, जहां तक इस बीमारी की कंटेनमेंट है, उसमें बहुत सफलता पाई. कि अभी आप जो अगर आप फिगर देखेंगे तो यूरोप के एक छोटे से मुल्क में भी हमसे ज्यादा होंगी. तो हमारे ये तो कामयाबी है. लेकिन जो बीच में जो एक नेगेटिविटी जो आई या एक ब्लेम गेम शुरू हुआ, अब 20-25 दिन तक एक डिबेट एक तबलीगी जमात के पीछे हो गई, तो इन द प्रोसेस जो बाकी की जो ऑपरेशनल डिटेल थी उसमें हम पीछे रह गए. दिनेश सिंह ने जैसे बहुत ठीक बात बताई कि हमारी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, जो मजदूरों का हाल हुआ, जो लेबर माइग्रेंट लेबर है जो लाखों की तादाद में, उनमें से कितने भूखे मर रहे हैं. और वहां पे हम मुझे ये कहते हुए दुख है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने भी लेट डाउन कर दिया कि उनकी जजमेंट यह है कि उनको शेल्टर होम में उनको खाना मिल तो रहा है और क्या चाहिए, ये कोई जवाब हुआ? जबकि आप देखेंगे जो तरक्की याफ्ता देश हैं उन
Right. I think there's an internet problem. Let me go back to Dinesh Singh ji. I want to put up another slide, Professor Singh. Now, yeah, Qureshi Saab is talking about the politics which unfortunately ended up becoming a part and parcel of this entire discourse. And Tablighi Jamaat individuals were without doubt, it was an irresponsible act that was indulged in. But the manner in which suddenly it was made to look like that there is, one community which is responsible for this outbreak of this virus, does it help our cause or not? So what I want to do is this, sir. I want to put up how the rest of the global community is actually dealing with the kind of questions that we are raising. Look at what's happening in the UK, look at what's happening in Spain, what's happening in Germany. In the United Kingdom, for 3 months, employees can get up to £2,000 of government support. Spain, bar on outright dismissal, full salary during lockdown. Germany, employees will tap into $26 billion euros insurance fund, is what I'm being told. In India, sir. Now, if I start looking at this in the context of the growth, in terms of unemployment, do we really have a solution? Do we really have a solution, much like what FDR did in America during, the New Deal, during the Great American Depression? What could be the New Deal for Modi-led administration at this time?
Bhupendra, this is very vital. I mean, the extent to which the United States has reached out, of course, it has enormous economic, financial clout. But I have been checking with people that I know in the US, and I know people who are fairly well off, even they will receive something like $1,000 or so in cash. So it's reaching out in a significant manner to its citizens. I can understand that India will not be able to do that. Yet, if India doesn't reach out at this point in time, take my word for it, the economy will be in severe depression. It is imperative that we begin to start looking at not just the data, but ways and means by which we could transfer purchasing power to people in the informal sector particularly. I'm not saying that we focus only on the informal sector, but particularly in the informal sector, we need to get purchasing power going. They are the ones who will lubricate the economy. Believe me, as little as I've understood the New Deal that FDR launched, and I'm not an economist, that's how he tried to get the US economy going, by getting purchasing power into the lower segments of society, the financially lower segments of society. We need to start working on that. Then the other thing they need to look at is prioritize our sectors in the formal area. I think retail, they must get some kind of retail moving with whatever support the government can offer, and transport. If we don't get our transport systems in order, nothing will happen. And I think, I don't have hard data. At this point in time, it's very difficult to get hard data. But if our transportation system, the railways, the transports on the road and other means, if we don't get them quickly going, we will be in deep trouble. So the government needs to focus on these sectors. They must find the financial wherewithal to handle this. And we will need out-of-the-box thinking for this. If we go by the standard prescriptions that so many of our Western-trained economists have been offering for so many years, they haven't really gotten us anywhere. So we need to be very out of the box.
But where is the question? How are we, Faye, are you getting this sense? The more I speak to decision makers here, and the more I look at the political discourse, look at the amount of time which is being spent on social media platforms by spokespersons of the ruling party to try and tell us that there is one community which is responsible. Tablighi Jamaat cannot be defended. Tablighi Jamaat members indulge in an irresponsible act, all very well. I accept that. But do you get this sense in Mumbai where you are that is enough time being spent trying to look for answers to these questions which are being raised by Professor Singh?
Well, Bhupen, obviously this is a solution that has to come from both state and from center. So there are various state governments doing various things. And then there is obviously the central government doing what the central government feels necessary at this point. But I think that of the suggestions that have come from most of the experts that I've spoken to, there are two things that have come up. One, we need to make sure that migrant laborers stay where they are at this point. We cannot have them walking because that puts their lives at risk. There are already stories of people dying of dehydration and dying of starvation on the road from walking. In order to have them stay where they are, they need two things. One is ration to everyone, whether or not they check out and have a ration card. I mean, the pilferation can't be greater than the lives of our citizens at this point. Second, a direct transfer of cash into the bank accounts of these people so that they're able to continue paying their water bills, paying their electricity bills, paying for provisions. Remember, it's not just a hot meal. These are electricians, these are plumbers, these are auto drivers, these are taxi drivers. These are people with a certain level of dignity who were earning money to pay school fees, to look after their children, to pay for their phone bills, to pay for electricity. You cannot replace that by offering them charity. There's no dignity in that, and our constitution guarantees dignity to every individual of this country. And you can't expect them to live hand to mouth, not knowing if that charitable meal is going to come tomorrow. They need to get cash transfers in their bank accounts, and they have to have free ration, irrespective of whether or not they're able to present ration cards. It's the only thing I believe that will make sure that people are able to stay where they are. They have to pay rent or in their colis, in whatever small space they're living in, big space they're living in. They have to be able to pay rent in order to continue living there. So without that rent, they're going to be evicted, and when they get evicted, they will start walking, and we can't have that. So this is largely where I believe the solution may lie. Now, where the government is going to find the money to do that and how it's going to happen, that's something obviously we're going to have to figure out.
Dimpy, in the Northeast, what's the story in Northeast? A month down in the lockdown period, and it was felt as if the Northeastern states were by and large not as heavily impacted as maybe the North Indian states, whether it's Delhi or Maharashtra, specifically Mumbai. Are people now beginning to feel the emotional pain? Is there a realization? I'll tell you, I'm in Bhimtal and I was talking to locals here, and everybody here is convinced that they are not going to be able to hold on to their jobs beyond 2 months. Now, in that kind of a scenario where people are beginning to feel that we may not be able to hold on to our jobs beyond 2 months, Dimpy, how does it impact the emotional well-being, emotional status of an individual?
In fact, Bhupendra, just to let you know that this is an entirely new situation that the entire world is facing. We never in our lives we had imagined that a situation will come where all of us will be locked inside our houses, and the entire world will come to a standstill. Saying that, in fact, whether it is in Northeast or for that matter, I'm getting phone calls from my clients in Delhi also. Because I'm a practicing counselor, I am part of Indian Academy of Health Psychology. So the kind of concerns that are being raised is regarding uncertainty, first of all. There's a lot of anxiety issues, a lot of depression. My students also are calling up. They're having issues related to insomnia. They're not getting proper sleep. And businessmen, they're calling up, they're saying that, okay, they're quite uncertain about the future regarding their businesses. So yes, there is a lot of, I would say, emotional turmoil that people are facing. And yes, and that is quite valid. In fact, I tell my clients also, whoever is calling, that it is quite normal. It is quite natural to feel so. First, accept that this is a situation which we have never ever encountered in our entire lives, and even ever thought also that a situation of this kind will ever emerge.
So let's specifically look at money question. Qureshi Saab, let's specifically look at the money question. Dinesh Singh talks about it, Faye talks about it. I've heard this from many experts. You need to find a way of putting money in the hands of individuals, in the pockets of migrant workers, poor people. But I want to know, Qureshi Saab, where is the money? I mean, if we are going to grow, as I'm saying, at 0%, not under 2%, make no mistake about this, it could well be a 0% GDP growth, for you. If you're looking at that kind of a scenario, where is the money? Kahan se aayega paisa, sir?
No, the government has to find ways. First, they have to economize. The proposal has been coming in the media from various sources that, the Central Vista redevelopment, which will cost 22,000 crores. Now, that money immediately should be diverted. That proposal can be postponed by a year or two, if not dropped altogether. So that effort has not been made from the government to mobilize funds. Appeal has been made to the people that we should be feeding each other, which is fine, and people are doing it. Volunteers are doing it. But it was pathetic when you saw the queues for Jan Dhan. Just for 500 rupees, women were standing for 4 hours for 500. And we heard from the media that they have to come 3 times to get 500 each. Now you are exposing them to this risk of coming out, coming into physical proximity. So why can't this money be given in lump sum? So I don't think the government has and the bureaucracy has applied its mind adequately to deal with these issues. And the plight of the very poor. It is all right for us to be locked down in our comfortable houses. We are all right. We are getting everything, but the people who are starving, we have to worry about them. And people, they might be getting their meals in shelter homes, but the money which they were sending to their families back home in Bihar and UP, what is the fate of those people? We have to examine that.
Dinesh Singh ji, I'm playing pictures right now, Dinesh Singh ji, of tomatoes. Farmers who cannot manage to sell their produce today are throwing their produce on the road itself, and this is their form of protest. Now, sir, imagine if this is the scenario, and right through this last 1 week, I got pictures from video volunteers. We've looked at pictures from Assam and West Bengal and everywhere. The reality appears to be the same. So I want to know, sir, what is it that India needs to learn from the rest of the countries? I agree that America is a $20 trillion country, Indian economy, not at that level. How do we deal with a problem of this magnitude, sir?
Well, Bhupen, so, we'll have to be fiscally a little, bold. That's the first thing. As Qureshi Sahab said, this is the government of India. Bharat Varsha hai. Ye aisa bhi nahi hai ki hum asahay hai. There is might in this country. और ये अनादिकाल से चला आ रहा है देश, ये ऐसे मिटने भी नहीं वाला है. तो गवर्नमेंट को भी वही उसी ऊर्जा और उसी आत्मविश्वास से कुछ बोल्ड, they will have to undertake some bold steps, fiscally bold steps. They could do many things. They could take money from the Reserve Bank, from IMF, whatever be the conditions. Even the IMF will give us good conditions. They could raise money by other means. I'm told that at this point in time the global market for oil is pretty bad for sellers. I don't know if India has enough storage capacity, but this is a good time to get some of that oil in, because then that can get your transport system going at very economical rates. So there are many things that the government could do. I'll tell you one more thing, Bhupen. This is, of course, very old data. 2013, a small project had been sponsored by the University of Delhi when I was the Vice Chancellor, when they looked at street vendors of Delhi. And they did a random sample and made an estimate that the number of street vendors at that time in Delhi was way beyond 6-7 lakhs, much more than that. They lubricate the economy. Whatever they earn, they're not going to put it into the stock market or put it into a bank or send it abroad. All that money gets spent immediately. And there's a fair amount over there. I do not have estimates. The thing is, the government must quickly, even in urban areas, get these street vendors off the mark, get them going. Of course, you have this fear of when will you ease the lockdown? And can I say something on the matter of lockdown and infection and stuff like that, if you permit, Bhupen?
Yes.
So look, I want to tell you something. For whatever reason, the infection rates in India are really low. And you have much evidence for that. Just imagine when all these migrants, they mixed like anything, not just in Delhi, so many cities. There's no question of social distancing. Had this been, say, some place like Spain or Italy, you would have had an explosion of infections. Nothing like that has happened. There is something working in India. It could be many things. I have looked at data. There are scientists at the University of Texas Medical Center in Houston, and I'm connected with some of them. They have come up with a marvelous study that shows that those countries that have a vigorous BCG vaccination program, in those countries, not only are the infection rates very low, but even the death rates are really low by a factor of 10 compared to other countries. Maybe this is working for India. But somewhere the government must start thinking about this, that maybe we are not in such a potentially explosive situation, and work out some kind of strategy, some tactics to get these markets going. You know, on the road where I live, there are about 100 street vendors just on this 1.5 kilometer road. And they can easily social distance themselves, and you can give them some kind of financial power and they could get their wares going. And given the fact that Delhi also hasn't exploded with infections, if they do this in a controlled experimental way, they will find ways and means of getting the economy moving even in these urban areas. You could do many things even in the rural areas. That's not happening. And finally, Bhupen, for all those who are anxious, and many of your co-panelists here have said that there is enormous anxiety. I have a friend who's counseling people in Pune. He's a professional psychiatrist. He told me that, you know, pharmacists have run out of the medicines that he's prescribing for his patients. That's the level of anxiety. India is far better off than most countries when it comes to infection through the coronavirus. I'll tell you something interesting.
So just one more. Let's take it one by one, because you're making an important point. That because many of us, children in our country, you know, we're all subjected to BCG vaccines. I've spoken to a lot of doctors. I'm sure you would have too. And both on my Periscope feed as well as on my Facebook feed, a lot of people making this point that we appear to be blessed with some kind of better immunity. Do you buy that, Faye? Or is it just very simple that we are just not testing enough? We don't have enough numbers, and we are going well by the data which is there in front of us.
So actually, there have been two interesting pieces of data released by the Health Ministry over the last 48 hours. One of those pieces of data is how many cases of SARI or severe and acute respiratory distress or influenza are showing up in our hospitals, ER rooms. Now, if assuming we weren't testing enough, and as a reason there were cases going undetected, they would present as severe respiratory distress, or they would present as very acute cases of influenza. But the SARI influenza cases have actually come down in India over the last 2 months. And so I doubt that there is, if there were cases that we had missed because we didn't test enough, they would eventually wind up in the hospitals. They would have eventually overwhelmed our hospitals and overwhelmed our crematoriums and overwhelmed, the data with local government on the number of deaths. Now, we haven't seen that happen. In Mumbai, where I am, I know that the quarantine facilities are being overwhelmed because the government is, especially the Maharashtra government and the BMC, is being extremely thorough. So they're on an average sending 40 people to quarantine for every case that's detected, just to make sure that they've got everything under control. So the quarantine facilities are being overwhelmed, but the hospitals have not been overwhelmed yet. And I think that that's a very good sign. Now, again, is this because we locked down very early? Is this because we have higher immunity? Is this because we've taken a vaccine, that seems to be working for us? It's actually very difficult to tell at this point. What we do know conclusively is that the number of cases and the number of deaths in India is a lot lower than other countries at the same phase of the progression of the illness. So our curve, while it hasn't, completely begun to sort of ebb, is not doing this. It's doing this at this point, which I think for all of us is a very positive sign. Something's
all right. Yeah. All right, Faye. I know you got to go, and you got to go do your own broadcast as well. But always a pleasure speaking to you, Faye.
Thank you.
We look forward to more.
A pleasure to speak with all of your guests as well this evening. I've missed my conversations with most of them. So thank you for organizing this today.
Thanks so much, Faye. Thanks so much, Faye. Well, Faye DSouza will go, but the rest of our panelists are going to stay. Dinesh Singh is there and Dimpy is there as well. So Dimpy, let's take this question, which comes up from what Faye says, that most people are not really ending up in hospitals. And Dinesh, you also suggesting that there appears to be something that's working in India's case. Do I then take this point, Dimpy, that maybe because of the panic, the hype which exists around this coronavirus, are people falling prey to that hype? I mean, somebody was telling me that, do you know any corona positive patient? And truth be told, in my immediate circle, thank God, I don't know anybody. But there are people, who've tested positive. There are people who've crossed 70,000. Today, Rashtrapati Bhavan itself has had a positive case. Do you think that in our minds, are we being impacted by this hype and this, this anxiousness all around us as well?
I think, Bhupendra, to an extent, that fear or the worry, that concern is playing a positive role also. I would say that a little bit of fear is not bad, because it is actually making people feel they are getting more cautious about this particular pandemic that is spreading across. In fact, if I have to talk about my state here, the health minister along with his team is doing commendable work. So I would say that, in fact, same as it goes for the other northeastern states also. If you see the numbers, that means it is considerably less. So preparedness here is pretty high. And also, I would say that, yes, a little amount of anxiety, a little amount of fear that you were talking about, that definitely is having a kind of a positive role to play. Excessive is not good, because that will again lead to panic-like situation. But little amount of it is not bad, because people are getting more careful, more cautious about it. We are asked to be, in quarantine, and yes, people are following the lockdown rules to a great extent.
If Dinesh, let me just move this discussion slightly forward. Across the world, either countries are trying to deal with the economic fallout. In America, there is a lot of work which is being done in terms of how do you create a medical solution to this. What's your take on what's happening in India? Is enough attention being shown on that front?
So Bhupen, I mean, I need to base my premise or suggestions on this assumption that the infection rates in India, for whatever reason, are not very high, even if there hasn't been much social distancing. I'm sure the lockdown has played a major role. Make no mistake, I'm not running down the lockdown. It's a great idea. It was necessary. But let's also recognize that where the lockdown has not been, observed in full measure, infection hasn't really gone up. Look at Dharavi. I mean, there's no way you can prevent Dharavi, if people will mingle. There is no really provision or room for social distancing in Dharavi. And yet, the number of infections in Dharavi is 100 odd. That's really small. So there is something happening here. The government must start recognizing that, look, Sweden has managed to keep things under control without social distancing, without any kind of lockdown. There are some other countries that have done that. There is also something about this virus. It has its limitations. It's not a superhuman virus event. If you look at the Diamond Princess and look at the data there, that was a completely closed environment. And yet, I think about 11 or 12 people died, and something like 700 were infected in a ship that had more than 3,500 passengers. And most of them were elderly. So there is much to be learned about this virus. We fear it too much. And the government must also learn that we should not fear it so much. I know that people are being infected, but just as you, have performed several experiments through people I know on WhatsApp groups, large groups. And I found that the infection rate on two major experiments that I performed with about 1,000 odd people, the infection rates that I figured was something like 0.03. And the government performed a random sample, the ICMR, and came up with an infection rate of 0.04. That's really low. That's really low. Most countries have had infection rates of 1.5 to up to 3. So India is certainly holding, for whatever reason, the lockdown, the BCG vaccine, and I have reason to believe even the polio vaccine has worked.
True.
There are
Dinesh, a lot of our viewers are watching this on Facebook and Twitter. Look at what Anurag Lal is saying on Facebook. And he seems to be in agreement with you that the issue with lockdown, he's saying, in India is that it's only partial. Many videos of people crowding in markets, in queues for free ration and food, etc. Lockdown even in 50% of India with 0 cases. So the result being that maybe more people, whoever, 17,000 plus people, would it be fair to say, Dinesh, actually, it could be because of panic? Lockdown led to a certain panic, led to a certain economic impact, and therefore perhaps in some large measures, people ended up being impacted by this virus because of this?
It could be. You see, there is a psychosomatic aspect to this whole problem. And believe me, I know many people who are very well informed, who are economically well off, and yet they are terrified. They're terrified of this. This is one other thing I need to assure our viewers and people at large. Do you know, Bhupen, the chances of dying of a road accident in India are
Much
far,
higher.
far higher than the
Yeah.
chances of dying through the coronavirus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let me also reassure your viewers on another matter, Bhupen. After a fair amount of study, look, no data can be perfect, especially when large numbers of humans are involved. But
Right.
there's been a fairly intense study of the Diamond Princess situation and what has happened in China, which is now completely understood, or at least fairly well understood. And they figured out that for 1,000 people who get infected, about 5 die. Just think about it. So if you work backwards, India has something like 500 odd deaths. So you can figure that it can't be more than 100,000 people that are infected in India. That's my guess. I'm telling you, with human figures of such large numbers, you can't have accurate data. But I must tell Indians that this doesn't mean, as Dimpy just said, that doesn't mean you just throw every caution to the winds and just go and hug everyone. No, we must wear masks. We must keep a distance. We must be
We have
cautious.
to take the precautions.
But we must also come out with a certain degree of measured boldness in effecting economic revival. If we don't do that, the country will get into deep trouble very soon.
All right. So lockdown 2.0 may well have served its purpose, but I have some bad news to give to all of you. I'm already beginning to pick this up from some states that this lockdown 2.0 could well be followed by lockdown 3.0. Now, there are all kinds of reasons which are being given. If there was to be a lockdown 3.0, Dinesh, what happens to Indian economy then? Please tell me. If we were to be in a lockdown state for another 2 weeks, can we take it? Can we afford it, sir?
So look, Bhupen, again, I don't have hard data, but the economy is suffering terribly. I mean, I've been talking to people who are reasonably well informed, no matter from where, rural areas, even urban areas, people are suffering. I mean, there are people who have no money. And this is largely the informal sector. By the way, I think the informal sector is beyond 70% of the economy. So you have to understand that will knock the roots out of your economic tree. And this lockdown must, if we effect a lockdown, we must figure out ways and means of getting the people back on their feet soon after the third lockdown, if at all we effect it, if at all. I'm not sure. If we do, we must by now have come up with very concrete strategies. I mean, you can't lock a nation indefinitely. It's the, I hate to quote Donald Trump, but he said that the cure cannot be worse than the disease. So we'll have to think about that also.
All right, Dimpy ji and Dinesh ji, always a pleasure speaking to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us in this edition of Talking to Bhupen.
It's a pleasure.
I just hope that all the wise words which are being expressed by Dinesh ji and all our other panelists are words which will reach to the policymakers. Because I couldn't agree more with Professor Singh. You can't have a scenario where a cure to a disease is worse than the disease itself. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Talk to Bhupen live on weeknights at 8 p.m. This is India's foremost interactive broadcast. All your questions, all your suggestions are points which we wish to take. And I promise you that as we go along, Talk to Bhupen is only becoming bigger. There are a lot of calls which I'm getting from a lot of individuals, a lot of stakeholders. People want to know how this is being done. Well, and one of our panelists was asking us, why am I wearing a woolen coat? I just want you to know I'm wearing a woolen coat because, well, I'm in Bhimtal. I'm in the hills of Bhimtal. My entire production team, my research team is in different parts of the country. And that's why we say that this corona pandemic will lead us to reimagine our lives in far different ways than we can think of. Jeremiah is on the Facebook, and I'm just going to take this last point specifically in the context of whether we were in for lockdown 3.0. She's saying our economy will suffer, people will be getting into depression, and more adults than children will start suffering a lot. That's something that we need to be extremely wary about. I'll see you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Till then, keep your comments, your suggestions coming. This show live across all social media platforms. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter. Wherever you go, you can find the stream. Any comment, any suggestion will reach to me via these streams. Thanks so much, guys. Stay safe. Stay well.